Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to make this cute burger animation and I really hope you will enjoy this one. And if you do, please don't forget to leave the like. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to learn in the most effective way, be sure to check out my courses. I carefully designed them to take you from beginner skills through low poly illustration all the way to full character illustration and textured environment in the shortest time possible. So if you're interested, please check out the link in the description. Now let's jump right into empty Blender file, and first of all let's delete everything except the camera. So let's select the cube and the light, press X and delete, and now we'll start with a round cube and we'll convert it to quad sphere. So for this you will need to go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons and search for Extra and enable Add Mesh Extra Objects add-on. So just check the box right here and close the preferences, and now you can press Shift A, go mesh, and you will see all the extra options right here and choose round cube. And now in the presets we'll change it to quad sphere and they'll give us nice topology for the burger bun. So let's go for a front view by pressing 1 on a numpad, and now let's tap into the edit mode. Now let's make sure we go into the X-ray view so we can select all the way through. Now press 3 for face select and select all of these bottom faces. Make sure you don't select any of these above the line, and press P and separate the selection so we split the ball into two. And now we can continue editing the top part right here. So first of all let's go for vertex select by pressing 1. Select the bottom row of vertices like this and press H to hide them so we don't edit them by mistake. And now let's select up here to select the top vertex, and let's click here to enable proportional editing, or press O, and now press G then Z and start moving things down. And you can increase or decrease the fall off with the mouse wheel, and let's just compress it down like this. And now we can press Alt H to unhide the bottom row of vertices, and now we can tab out and let's select the bottom, tab into the edit mode, and here I want to do the same thing. So select this, press H to hide, and now select the bottom vertices like this. Make sure you don't select any of these above and start moving up. So press G then Z and start moving up slightly, just like that. And now we'll start scaling things. So let's press S then Z and scale this so we get almost flat bottom like this. And now press G then Z and move this up, and you can increase the fall off even more so the whole thing moves. And now if you press Alt H you will unhide this and you will have a shape like that. And now let's alt click the top loop, press F to fill, and first of all we'll go I for inset to create a nice edge there, and now press X and delete the faces there. Now let's switch to the edge select by pressing 2, alt click this inner loop and press Ctrl F and choose grid fill. So this way we are sure we have some quad geometry right there, and we'll do the same thing for the top of the bun. So tab out, select the top, and with the bottom loop already selected we can press F to fill and I to inset, and again we'll press X and delete faces, alt click this loop again, make sure you are in the edge select still, press Ctrl F and grid fill. Now to make sure we didn't mess the normals we can press A and Shift N to recalculate the normals, and let's do the same thing down there. So this will be our burger. Now let's look from the front, and I want to move things up a little bit. So let's select the top, press G then Z and move it up. And now the bottom. Now here I want to go to the edit mode because I want the origin point to stay there at the bottom. Select all by pressing A, G then Z and move this up so it sits on that origin point, and now we can disable proportional editing. So now we can tab out, let's move this higher up still, and now we can start creating, you know, the meat and the cheese and stuff like that. So let's select this part, tab into the edit mode, and we can just select this middle vert just for the purpose of moving the cursor there. So Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now we can tab out, let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. Now 32 vertices is totally okay, so we can tab into the edit mode, make it a little bit smaller. And now we'll do the similar thing as with the buns. So press F to fill and I to inset. Now we can press X and delete faces, go for edge select by pressing 2, alt click the loop, press Ctrl F and grid fill. Now alt click the outer loop, press E then Z and extrude it up, and again F then I to inset, X delete faces, and again we'll grid fill this. Now we can tab out, let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Now let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, press G then Z and move it up like here. Now we can tab in, right click and choose subdivide and increase to 10. 10 subdivisions should be enough. And now press E to extrude, and I think that will be quite enough for the cheese. So now we can press A to select all and press S to scale and Shift Z to scale only on X and Y axis like this. I want little of these corners, you know, to be peeking out, so this is quite okay. And now we can tab out and let's select the meat. And now let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, and instead of Alt D we'll press Shift D to create a unique duplicate and press Z and move this up. And unique duplicate because I want to go into the edit mode, so tab in, press A to select all and press Shift D to duplicate this. And let's make this smaller and press S then Z to scale it on a Z axis. Now let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad and press G then Z and move it down like this. This will be like a splatter of mustard or ketchup or something, what have you, but this will be a part of the object, so we don't have too many objects in place. So let's tab out. And now we can add some subdivision surface. So let's turn off the X-ray and let's just select everything and let's press Ctrl 3 to add 3 levels of subdivision. Now we can go to the modifiers panel, and with every object selected, let's hold Alt and increase the levels for the render as well. So nothing gets messed up upon the render time. So now let's select the top of the bun and press G then Z and move it down like this. And we can optionally move these closer because the subdivision made them a little bit thinner. Okay, like this. And now select everything again, right click and shade smooth. So this is the basic shape of the burger. And now I want to prepare this a little bit for the animation. So let's select the cheese. And now in the object data properties, we'll create some shape keys. So let's create a new one. That will be the basic. And let's create 2 more. Now let's select the key one. Tab into the edit mode. Now go for vertex select by pressing 1 on a numpad and just select these vertices in the corners by holding shift, just like this. Now we'll enable proportional editing again, press G then Z and start moving them down, but reduce the fall off with the mouse wheel, so we are only moving these corners down like this. Okay, and now let's tab out. Let's select the second key, tab into the edit mode, press G then Z and move this up like this. Now tab out and you will see the shape stayed the same, but if you modify the value for these shape keys, you are able to modify that shape according, you know, to your edits. So this is basically prepared for the animation. So let's expand the timeline a little bit, and now the end of the animation will be something really short, like 60 frames. You can move this with the middle mouse button and hold Control and middle mouse button to zoom in a little bit on the animation. And now in the output settings, let's go and change the frame rate to something like 30, and that'll give us basically 2 seconds of animation, which will be enough because we want this to be quick and snappy. And I want the burger to jump a little bit, but in a very stylized and snappy way, with making a distance between all of the parts and then, you know, collapsing them together. So first of all, I will parent everything to the bottom part of the bun. So let's select everything, hold shift and select the bottom, and press Ctrl P and parent to object. So now if you move this, everything will move as well. And let's insert some keyframes. So let's press N for the side panel here, and in the item menu we'll insert 2 keyframes, one for the location and one for the scale. So let's right click the Z location and let's insert single keyframe, and let's insert single keyframe for the Z scale as well. And I'm doing this by single keyframes because I want to keep this tidy and smooth. You know, we only will have 2 animation tracks right here. Now I want this animation to wind up a little bit, so before the jump the bun will actually collapse a little bit, it will compress. So let's move to like frame 7 or something, or 6, and press S then Z and just scale it down like that, and you will see the Z change. So right click and insert single keyframe. And now let's move to frame 10, and here I want the jump to start. So let's find the location track, that's this one. So let's select the keyframe right here. Don't worry about all of these above, select it. Just make sure the bottom is not selected, so select this one right here, press Shift D and just move it right here. So this just duplicates the Z location of the objects to frame 10. And let's make sure we duplicate it on a frame like 4D or something. So let's press Shift D and duplicate it right here as well. And right here, the jump will happen. So let's press G, then Z, and move it up like this. And right click and insert single keyframe. So now this will compress and it will jump and land back. So of course this is not great, so after the compression we'll need to reset the scale, but I want this to start happening right here, and as the jump happens the expansion continues and even goes larger a little bit. So we can select the Z scale that's right here on the left, press Shift D and duplicate it right here. Let's move to the center. And now let's make this a little bit larger even. So let's press S, then Z, and expand it a little bit, like this. And now right click and replace single keyframe. Now the advantage of this is obviously that all of these objects, because they're parent of this, will scale up and down, so it will look nice. And now when the burger lands, we want this to collapse again a little bit. So we can use this keyframe right here, press Shift D and move it there. And then it will spring back. So let's select the first one, press Shift D, and this can be a little bit further away, something like this, so it happens in a slow motion. So this is something we have, and you know, it doesn't look great, it's not snappy, because we'll need to modify the curves a little bit. So let's expand this and let's press Ctrl Tab to see the graph editor. And now to zoom in on our animation, we can press A to select all keyframes and press period on a numpad to actually see the animation curves. So now here I want this to be more snappy in the beginning, so I will turn this handle so the scale starts to compress right away like this, and then the start of the jump should be more snappy as well. But you can see we are modifying this as well, which I don't want. So let's go back a little bit and let's select this frame and we'll press V for the keyframe handle type and we'll choose free. So now we are able to modify just one side like this, and let's create a nice curve like that. And here we'll do the same thing. And you can see now the motion is much more snappy. It's a little bit faster and more cartoonish. And now here I want to modify this even more. So let's kind of wrap this motion around the underlying one. We can move this a little bit. Okay, and one thing we can do is select this keyframe right here and change the interpolation. So there are several predefined interpolations. So we can press T and we can choose from multiple of options, but I like these dynamic effects here, and we can choose bounce, and they'll basically create transition from this keyframe to this keyframe in this bouncing motion. So it will be a little bit snappy, but I want to move this a little bit closer here, and we can do something like this here. Okay, let's round this up a little bit. Okay, so these are the shapes of the animations. If you have trouble with the motion, you can just pause here and you see all of these shapes right there, and you can basically just duplicate this, and basically this is the motion we have, the basic motion of the burger jump. And now I want to sprinkle in a little bit of the secondary and tertiary motion, because that will make this animation even more cool and even more snappy. So first of all, I want these separate components to jump over each other a little bit, if it makes sense, you know, to make a little bit of a distance when they're in the middle of the jump. So that's a very easy thing to do. We'll just go one by one and add some motion. So first of all, let's expand this, and I will hide the Z scale, we don't need that, and just select everything here for the location and press Ctrl C. And now we'll select the first part of the meat and just insert Z location keyframe. So right click and insert single keyframe. And now we can press Ctrl V to paste that same motion, but you can see it moved down because it started on the 0 and in relation to the bottom of the bun, the burger was already moved. So we can just go for the front view by pressing 1 on a numpad in the viewport. And here in the graph editor, we can press G then Y and start moving things up. So we move the whole animation and its starting point right here. So now you will see it has its own jumping motion, but it's obviously too much. So we can go to the top of the jump right here and just move this down wherever we want, like this. But you can see these handles are too long. So let's go back and we can select everything, even the handles, and just press G then Y and move it down like this. And then if the handles are quite short already, we can select only the keyframe and move it down. So we just want slight jump over the bun right here. If it's hard to edit, you can always again press A to select all and period on a keyboard to focus on your animation, and now continue your edit. So we have this slight jump right here, and now we can select this, press Ctrl C and select the cheese above it, and right click and insert single keyframe. Go to the frame 1 and press Ctrl V to paste it here. And now again we'll move it up, so press G then Y and move the whole animation up like this. And now if you move to the middle of the jump, we can select this and move it higher up like this, and the handles too. Now again we can select all of these, press Ctrl C, select the last component right here, make sure you go to the frame 1, right click and insert single keyframe, press Ctrl V, and again we'll need to move this up a little bit like this so it sits above the cheese. And now we'll edit the jump. So let's go right here, and here it needs to go higher up over the cheese like this, and the handles too. Now this is again a little bit too unwieldy, so I'll press A and period to kind of refocus on the keyframes and on the curves and move it higher up. And now let's do this one last time. So let's select everything here, press Ctrl C, we'll select the top of the bun, make sure you go to frame 1, right click and insert single keyframe, press Ctrl V, and again we'll move the whole thing up. So press G then Y and move the frames, or the curves rather, up here, and then in the middle of the jump we'll go higher up here, and we can select the handles too. Okay, something like this. And now we can kind of redistribute it. I want the distances to be shorter down here and larger at the top, so let's select this. We can focus on our animation and bring this lower like this. Then we have the cheese kind of like that. This can go a little bit lower. And now the top of the bun. I think this can go lower still. Okay, so now if you look at our animation, it jumps and kind of creates those distances, which looks totally cool in this context. And now it's time for some tertiary motions. So these will be the details on some particular part. So for example, I want the cheese corners to fly up and down, you know, to flap a little bit as the motion goes. That will help to sell the motion a little bit better. So let's go to the frame 10. And now let's go to the object data properties, and here we have these shape keys. So let's expand our animation. And first of all, let's press Ctrl Tab. We'll switch back to keyframes a little bit. And now let's go to frame 1 and just insert keyframe on the key 1 and key 2. So press I, hovering over this number, and I again right here. And now just move to frame 10 and let's do the same thing. So this probably won't have too much motion. We'll see about that. But now when it flies up, we want the key 1 to go all the way to 1. Press I. So we have something like this happening. And now it should go the other way around, but the timing won't be the same as the rest of the animation because we need to take a little bit of physics into the account. So the moment it goes down, it should start coming up. So let's move somewhere here and let's modify this to 0, press I to insert keyframe, and let's modify this to 1 and insert keyframe. So it will do something like this and fly down, and then when it hits the ground, it should collapse a little bit. So let's select this one, press Shift D, move it here, and here we'll again move this to 0, move this to 1, and let's move up right here, and let's set this to 0, and here we'll do some of that bouncy thing. So now let's Control Tab to go into the graph editor, and we can hide the Z location animation so it doesn't get in the way, and let's select everything by pressing A and period to focus on our animation. And it kind of looks cool, but at the end, let's see, that's the key too. So we want this one, it's probably this one right here. Yeah, so let's select it, press T and choose bounce. So it will do that bounce here as well. And now you can just go through the animation and see if it works, but I think this looks quite nice. Maybe the transition can happen a little bit earlier, so maybe we can move some of these frames a little bit earlier, so the corners start flying up a little bit sooner. Okay, something like this. And now another tertiary motion, I want to add some wiggle to these components. So let's select, for example, the meat, and let's add Y rotation. So let's right click, make sure you're on the frame 1, right click and insert single keyframe for the Y rotation. Now Control Tab for the graph editor, and we can select the rotation channel right there and add the modifier right here, and let's add the noise modifier. This will look quite messy, but let's restrict the frame range. And as we know, the motion in the air happens between frames 10 and like frame 38. So let's start at frame 10 and let's end at frame 38. And now we'll just need to modify the wiggle because this is probably too large and you can see a little bit too hectic. So let's decrease the strength to something like 0.25 and increase the scale to something like 3, so we only have like a few wiggles happening here. Okay, something like this. And now we'll do the same for the rest of these components. So let's select the cheese, make sure you go frame 1, right click and insert single keyframe for the Y rotation, and select the Y rotation here in the graph editor, add the noise modifier, restrict the frame range 10 and 38, and now 3 for scale and 0.25 for the strength. And I will do this for the rest of these objects a little bit. So now, as you can see, the noise will be same, so they're doing the same motion, but you can easily modify that by moving the offset a little bit. So you can kind of modify this a little bit with the offset so it's not all the same. So now it will look much more natural like this. So these are the secondary and tertiary motions, and now if you go to the camera view, let's select the camera, press G and Z to move it up a little bit. Now let's zoom in. Well, we can collapse this. We probably won't need this view anymore. And now we can play back the animation, and this is what we have here. Now, the one thing we can do to make this look a little bit better is to add some displacement. You can also do that with the materials, so it's totally up to you. I will just quickly go, select the meat here and add some displace modifier, create a new texture and choose the clouds texture for that, and reduce the strength to something like 0.1. or maybe even 0.05, so we have some structure there. And then basically I will just select these two, hold shift, select this one as last, and copy to select it. So I have the same modifier on all of these, but here I want to modify the texture for the cheese. So let's go to the texture settings, and I will just duplicate it right there and increase the size so it's not so distorted. So this will add slight level of detail here. And now you can hold shift S, snap cursor to world origin, press shift A, add a plane. That'll be our background, so tab in, press S to make it really large. And let's look from the camera view, and now we can modify the resolution in the output settings to something like 1600 to 1200 and bring the camera closer a little bit. Okay, something like this. Now let's go to the render settings. I will switch to cycles, enable GPU, denoising for the viewport and for render, and then choose something like 64 samples for the render because I want to test out the render first. And now let's press Ctrl B and limit our rendering to only the camera bounds, and we can hold Z and switch to rendered preview. And there's not much to see because we don't have any lights in scene, so let's press Shift A and we'll add a light. Let's add area light, press G then Z and move it up. And now we can increase the size in the light settings here, so we have a nice large soft light here. And let's modify this to something like 500 and bring it up even higher. We can change this to disk, so this way we can have some nice top-down light. And now let's select the background and we'll add some color to that and increase the roughness there all the way. Now let's select the meat. There'll be like a reddish brown color like this, and nice orangey yellow cheddar like this. And here we can go low on the roughness, and here we can choose the same material right here and choose the bun, create a new material, and let's modify the color to something like this. And we'll play a little bit more with this material, so let's choose the same material down there. And now we can go to the shading workspace. Let's look from the front, and now we'll add some gradient there. So first of all, let's select the principal BSDF, and we'll press Shift A and choose texture and gradient texture. And now let's press Shift A and we'll choose the vector and choose the mapping node, and then Shift A and choose the input and texture coordinate. So now we'll use the object texture coordinates to plug into the vector, and now we'll choose the output for the texture and then plug the texture right here. So we can see the gradient happening there, and we need to rotate it obviously. So let's rotate the Y rotation to 90, and then we can move the X up and down. We can hold Shift for smaller increments to kind of position this a little bit better. And then we can press Shift A and add converter and color ramp to compress this a little bit better, like that. Okay, something like this. So we clearly have this gradient happening right there, and now we'll use it as a mask for the colors. So let's move this to the side. Let's press Shift A and we'll go color and mix color. Plug it right here, but make sure you plug this into the factor. And now let's unplug this. Let's press Ctrl C over this color right here, because that's the color we wanted for the bun. So let's press Ctrl V and paste it right here to the B color. And now let's plug it back in, and I can see I have it the other way around. I want this to be at the bottom, so I'll press Ctrl V right here as well. And now I will modify the bottom one to make it a little bit darker and more reddish or brown, so they'll create this effect right here. And basically that's it for the bun shader. Now if you want, you can plug the same color to the subsurface color and add a little bit of a subsurface, something like 0.1, and modify the subsurface radius to 0.1 as well. And now let's go to the layout view. So now the rest can be all about, you know, adding little details. You can add like sesame seeds on the top of the bun. You can add like a spilled ketchup or some bottles, or you know, glasses, whatever you like to make this a little bit more interesting. And of course we'll need to take care of the lighting because this is too flat. So you can always just press Shift A and add another area light, bring it up like this, and add some strength, something really strong. Let's change it to disk, make it a little bit larger, and then move it around on X and Y axis to create this nice soft light coming from the side or from the back. And then do it for the other side and maybe bringing it a little bit further away so it only creates a touch of light on the side. So basically you need to make sure you are not overlighting, overblowing your scene. Something like this, and then you can create a little bit of a backlight there. Bring it down. Make some light bleed on the bun as well. And here we can increase the roughness for the bun, of course. And maybe change the color of the light so it's a little bit warmer right here. Like this. And then in the world settings, you can add some color to the world so it blends these materials a little bit better together. And finally, in the render settings, color management, you can play with the contrast settings and the exposure if your scene is, for example, too dark or something. So that's the burger jumping animation, and I really hope you enjoyed this one. And again, if you did, please don't forget to leave the like, and if you're new around here, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.
1, 2, 3, 4.